Hello there, ladies and gents, welcome to another repair video. So today we're going to be looking at this Nintendo Switch which I've got here, and this Nintendo Switch is a little bit of a troll. So this Nintendo Switch was sent by a business that I do business to business repairs with, and unfortunately this thing here was supposed to have no power. So I thought to myself, well, nice and easy, usually an M92 or a charging port related issue. But unfortunately this doesn't have no power. First of all, you can see that it is absolutely mangled. I do not have a clue what to expect when I get inside this thing. But the second thing is it's not a no power issue. If I try and turn it on, blue screen of death. That's not a no power, that is a blue screen of death. And the blue screen of death can only mean one thing, and that is that it's got a communication issue between the RAM data lines and the CPU. Which is bad news for this Nintendo Switch because it's not really an easy task to do. It's not an impossible task to fix it, but basically what happens is as the Nintendo Switch becomes bent, because they all do because Nintendo, but basically these are really weak. What happens is the chassis will bend, and unfortunately that will cause the traces on the CPU to basically disconnect from the board. And most of the time it involves running jumper wires underneath the CPU because the traces actually get torn. It really does suck, and it's not the most pleasant job to do because you've got to use 0.067mm jumper wire to be able to actually fix the issue. And 0.067mm jumper wire, to put it into context, is the same diameter as human hair. It is incredibly thin, and it's very difficult to work with because it just breaks. So basically, just to put it into a nutshell, the issue is generally related to a communication issue between the CPU and RAM data lines, and that's what causes the blue screen of death. But we're going to take a look. Hopefully we're going to get it fixed, but you know, just given the state of the USB port alone, this doesn't look good for this Switch. But we're going to do our best. We're going to see what we can do. So let's get into the video. Okay, so as you'll see here, it's been absolutely mangled. So if I zoom in on this, it's literally looking like it's been snapped. It's that bad. I don't think I've seen one this bad for a while, to be honest. So yeah, even the serial number's missing off this, which is weird. So I'm going to take it apart. I'll fast forward through this process, but I'm going to take it apart and then I'm going to, you know, inspect the board, see what kind of damage we're looking at. This might be a very, very short video based on what I can see so far. It might be a very short video because it looks like someone's been in here and tried to have a little snack on the board. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so I've got the screws out, so pretty much ready to come out now. I've just got to disconnect the ribbons. So basically, what I always do with the blue screen of death is I'll attempt to power it on while I'm putting pressure on the CPU. So what that's going to do is it's going to tell me whether or not we've got damaged traces under the CPU. This is always a disconnect issue where the CPU will disconnect itself from the board. But basically, by putting pressure on the CPU, that's going to tell me whether or not the traces underneath are damaged. Because if they're not damaged, then I could potentially get away with just reflowing the CPU. I actually did one a couple of days ago on a live stream where I did reball it. You know, sometimes we do have to reball these, but, you know, it's not the most fun job in the world. I'm going to admit I don't enjoy doing these. I don't enjoy reballing them. It's not incredibly difficult, but, you know, if you can reflow them, then, you know, reflow it first. But if you can't reflow it, then it does always need a reball. So, unfortunately, you know, it's just one of them things. Now, a lot of people will say that there's people out there reflowing GPUs and that it's not a correct fix. In the case with the Nintendo Switch, that is not applicable. The CPU does become disconnected because of bending issues, and I mean, you can see the state of this here, so you can see where it actually starts to bend. And what it does is it'll flex the board this way, and it'll cause the CPU traces to disconnect from the board, or the CPU balls. So underneath the CPU is a BGA, it's a ball grid array. I can show you an example, not of the CPU because I haven't got one to hand, but these solder balls that are here, that's called a BGA. It's a ball grid array, which is an array of solder balls. You got another one there, and there's one under the CPU as well. So basically, that's called a BGA, and what that does is it'll take all of these traces. The traces will go off to, you know, different areas of the board and stuff like that. But basically, there's a couple of data lines on this bottom RAM chip here, which always become disconnected from the board. So they become disconnected on this side, on the CPU side, for some reason. I don't know if that's just an inherent weak point or what, but you know, they become disconnected in this bottom corner here, and sometimes in this bottom corner, and very occasionally you'll get one in this top corner which will disconnect as well. The one in this corner, when it disconnects, is normally a ground point, so it's normally not that bad. But, you know, whether or not it's viable to fix all depends on whether or not it's got more than one or two traces damaged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in what I believe is a charged battery, and I'm going to press down on the CPU and I'm going to try and turn the console on just to see if it does turn on when I press on the CPU. And that's going to give me a general idea of whether or not I can get away with a reflow. It won't give me a definitive idea. This one might not actually work. I think it might be corroded. I thought it was charged, but it probably isn't. So all I'm going to do, we've got plastic falling out everywhere, look. Never mind. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to press down. Oh, there's another one. I'm going to press down on the CPU, just there. So the CPU is under this copper tape. Press down on that. And then I'm going to attempt to turn it on. Okay, that battery I don't think works, never mind. So I'll just plug the battery in, and then I'll just plug the charger in as I'm pressing down on it. No, it's still got a blue screen of death like that. Let's press down in this corner. No, still got a blue screen of death. Let's try the bottom RAM IC. Still got a blue screen of death. Let's try the top RAM IC. Top RAM IC. It's not actually the CPU. Look at that. Press down on the top RAM IC, put some pressure on that, and it's working. So it's actually the top one, it's not the bottom one. So it's going to be this RAM IC here. So we should just get away with a reflow on this, honestly. And it's going to be a reflow of the RAM IC, not of the CPU, which is quite different, actually. So this is why I say that it's not the case where people are reflowing GPUs and stuff like that. It's not the same situation, and I don't care what anyone tells me. I don't care what anyone says about, you know, you're justifying it for a means to an end and blah, blah, blah. It's not the case. The case with these, it is literally down to a bending board, and the board becomes warped, and that is what's causing the blue screen of death, because the communication between the RAM and the CPU isn't there. So basically, if I have to reball it, then I have to reball it. You know, I'll do what I've got to do to get this working. But essentially, the issue here is a communication issue between the top RAM chip, so this one, just here, and the CPU. So hopefully we can get this working. I mean, you did just see that, you know, it is actually displaying when I press down on that top RAM chip, which means that it is definitely an issue with that top RAM chip. Or, well, 99% sure, unless it's an issue with this top corner of the CPU, but I've never come across that where that top corner is faulty. So what I'll do then, I'll take it all apart. Well, I've already taken it apart, but I'll just get this board out. There we go. And I'm going to have to take the CPU shield off. So I'm not going to be a silly boy, and I'm not going to use my good tweezers. Okay, so like I said, the issue is most likely going to be with this RAM IC just here. So there's two RAM ICs, I believe they're both 2 GB modules. I think the switch has got 4 GB in total. There's two RAM ICs here, and what seems to be the case is this RAM IC here has become disconnected from the rest of the board, or rather some of the data lines on there have, and that causes corrupted data, prevents it from booting, so the data will copy over from the NAND to the RAM. It becomes corrupted because it can't actually copy properly, and then it just won't boot. That's from what I've gathered. I'm not an engineer, I don't know how these things work exactly, but what I do know is the cause and solution to the blue screen of death. This one's somewhat different because it's not usually that RAM IC, it's usually that RAM IC, and it's usually this side of the board what goes bad. There we go. So we get rid of the thermal paste because thermal paste attracts heat, and we don't want uneven heat spots around the board. So we get rid of the thermal paste now, and then that way it's not going to draw any heat towards that specific area on the chip and cause any further damage. Now when I put this back together, I won't be actually putting this copper tape back on. The reason being is because it's actually been proven that it gets better cooling without that copper tape. The fact that it's got the copper tape there, well, it's one extra layer, right? And it's also more thermal paste that you've got to use, so it's more places for the heat to transfer. So what I'll do with this is I'll take this copper tape off, and that way then I don't need to put thermal paste under the copper tape and on top of the copper tape. It'll just have a direct contact between the die on the CPU and or rather the SoC, should I say, because I know I'll get comments about that. But basically it'll have a direct contact between the SoC and the heatsink, and it's one less failure point. It's one less point that it's got to go through to actually cool the system. So that is ready, and I'm going to get this under the microscope. Let's turn it around that way. I'll get this under the microscope and I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, so we've got this RAM IC here, and basically the issue appears to lie with this. Let's see if we can actually see it or not. I don't think we can, but the issue appears to lie with this particular RAM IC here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some flux around the chip. Now you want to remember that you've always got to add flux because otherwise it's not going to reflow properly. So I'll add some flux there, and that will make its way under the chip. And then at 440 degrees Celsius with 40% airflow, I'm going to reflow this chip using hot air. I'm not going to use a nozzle. I don't need to use a nozzle for this. In fact, I'd rather not use a nozzle because it allows the heat to distribute more evenly across the chip. So I'm not going to use a nozzle. I'm just going to heat the area up. Every so often I'm going to just come in and tap the chip. I'm actually going to increase to 460, it doesn't seem to be transferring enough heat. There we go, the chip's starting to move. And that is successfully reflowed. Well, should be successful. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just wait for this board to cool down. I don't want to put some isopropyl alcohol there until the board is cool. The reason for that is because I don't want the board to cause thermal shock by rapid cooling. So I'm going to wait for a little while, and then eventually I'm going to come in and put some isopropyl alcohol down just to neutralise this flux that's underneath the chip, and also to clean out what's around the chip. Okay, that should be good. So one thing I do want to do is just inspect this port and just see what the deal is with this. I mean, that port does not look great. It's definitely damaged. You can see a little pin sticking out there. I mean, you can see the pin sticking out. It's not very easy to get more light on that. But you can see that pin is definitely sticking out there at the end. And also what you can see as well, the port itself is starting to come apart, look. There you go. So the port itself is starting to come apart and it's definitely going to need replacing. So we're going to replace the port. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to weigh the board down. It's hanging over the edge of the table right now. But I'm basically weighing the board down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with some heat from the bottom of the board. So from underneath the board. I'm not going to heat up from the top. So you can see I've got my hot air here. I'm just going to hold the heat there. 480 degrees Celsius, 40% airflow. I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to hold this heat here. I'm not going to use any low melt solder. Not going to use any leaded solder. I'm just going to hold the heat here until I see these ground legs melt. Should be about another 10 seconds. It shouldn't take long at all. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And there we go, it's ready. Just lift off the port. And there we go, that port is removed, nice and safe. Don't need to worry about damaging any traces. Don't need to worry about any low melt solder or anything like that. Suck out those ground holes. I know it's a little bit difficult to see. I am hanging over the edge of the table, so there's nowhere for the light to bounce off. I'm just going to clean out the ground holes. Okay, I'll do that one with solder wick. It's not cleaning out fully. It's a little bit difficult with the solder sucker on these, but I don't want to leave the heat on the board for much longer. So that's pretty much cleaned out, as you can see. And I don't even need to use the solder sucker and finish cleaning that out. What I can do is just clean this up and then tin the pins, and I can drop a new port straight on. So just use a bit of isopropyl alcohol just to clean up the oxidation and little bits of gunk that's all over it. That could have been why the customer's having power issues. So I'm going to get some leaded solder and I'm going to replace the solder that's on here at the minute. Okay, there we go. Let's hang it back over the edge of the desk. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab a brand new port and I'm going to drop a new port onto this. Okay, so to put this port back on, I'm going to do it exactly the same way as I took it off, and that's going to be to heat up from the bottom. And I'm going to wait for the solder on the top right and the bottom left to melt. Notice how I'm not moving the port into position until that's done. I don't want to put heat on this for longer than I need to. Okay, so I've just dropped that port in there, and as you'll see by the pins at the back, it is lined up. I'm just going to wiggle it around a little bit and then press down on it. There we go. I'm going to hold that for a minute just until that settles, and that should be good. It should be sat down nice and even. And inspecting the port on an angle, that looks absolutely perfectly aligned to me. So we've got a nice alignment on the pins and they also seem to be sitting nice and flat, but I am going to just come in with the soldering iron and some flux, and I'm basically going to just touch those pins up. So the ones at the back, I want to make sure 100% that they're soldered. Unfortunately, we can't really do a lot about the pins that are hidden underneath the port. You know, we just have to hope that they're soldered, pretty much. So I'm just going to drag over all of these. And that should be good. Beautiful. Looks good to me. So on the back of the board, we do have a little bit of melting on the port. That's fine. It's better than not having a port at all. So I'm just going to add some solder to these ground legs. So you've got to expect a little bit of melting on the port because of the method used to actually install a new port. Okay, just make sure there's enough solder on all of those legs. And then I'll come in from this side and do the front of the port as well. So this just makes sure that the port itself is soldered sufficiently and that it's not going to just end up bending and snapping. That is more than sufficient. Okay, just clean up and give it a test. Okay, that looks good to me. Time for a test. Right, okay, so here we are then. So the RAM has been reflowed and the port has been replaced. Hopefully it's going to work now. One thing I did notice earlier was this does have some indication of a previous spill. So definitely had some liquid damage in the past, but I didn't notice any corrosion on the board itself, so I don't think it got to the board. But on the game card reader itself, you can see that it has had some sort of liquid damage. Okay, so that's back together enough just to test it. I haven't put all of the screws in. I've put the board screws in. The board's held down nice and secure. But basically, it's got enough to test it. I just need to confirm it's working. And then as long as it is, I can put it all back together. I am going to secure the port in because I don't want to end up breaking it and have to replace it and replace 10 traces with it. So let's just plug it in. Let's just see if anything changes. You ready? Right, so sorry about the jump cut there. I basically just had a phone call I had to take. This port's melted. I've got to do the port again. So yeah, I can't use the port at all. That kind of sucks. So I'm gonna have to get a charged battery and just see if I can power it from there, just to confirm whether or not the blue screen issue has been fixed, and then I'll have to change the port again. But it is what it is, you know, sometimes the ports melt, sometimes there's nothing you can do. I mean, I didn't keep the heat on there for that long. This is actually one that I reballed a couple of days ago. I gave this away to a viewer on the channel during one of my live streams, but this actually got reballed a few days ago. So let's just plug that battery in. I know that battery's got some power in it. Flip that round. And it does indeed boot. No blue screen. Yep, that's absolutely fine. I haven't plugged that touchscreen in. Either I haven't plugged the touchscreen in correctly, or the touchscreen isn't working. This might end up needing a touchscreen replacement, and if that's the case, then is it even worth doing this console? Yeah, I mean, it's had reflow, it's had a port. It's getting, well, it will have had a port by the time I actually do it. It's getting a little bit close to my cut-off point here. I mean, just given the work that's been done to it so far, I mean, I guess I could put the new digitizer on there if it needs a new digitizer, of course. I could put a new digitizer on there at cost, so, you know, just parts cost only. I mean, that is always an option, because one thing you have to remember with some of these jobs is it's not all about taking as much money as you can from the customer. At least not for me, it's not. For me, I enjoy the repairs. I do care about the money, obviously. I mean, I'd be stupid not to. I don't care to try and take my customers for everything, everything that I can. If I can help a customer out and still make a decent bit of money, I would rather make a little bit of money than no money at all. So let's say, for example, I don't get this working. I don't change the touchscreen and I say, no, it's just not worth repairing at this point. I've done that charge port, and I've done that reflow on that RAM IC for free. I mean, the reflow on the RAM IC takes a couple of minutes. The charge port costs money. You know, you're talking, you got to use hot air, solder, you got to use flux, and your time as well. So, you know, that does start to actually cost money. So that's the point where you've got to say, right, well, do I call it quits and just say, no, this is not viable to fix? Or for the sake of the customer spending £10 on a part and not paying any extra labour, do you basically just replace the digitizer at cost and at least make a little bit of money rather than, you know, no fixing it and sending it back as beyond economical after you've done all that work? Because the problem is as well is you can't really confirm whether or not the touchscreen and things like that are working until you've actually got the console working. So things like the game card reader, touchscreen module, all of that sort of stuff, you cannot confirm whether it's working or not until it's basically too late. That's the problem. So at that point, what I tend to do is, you know, if it needs a fan or it needs a touchscreen or something similar, you know, a lot of the time I'll just say, right, well, it's cost me £9, something like that, for the touchscreen. The customer can have the touchscreen for £9 and I'll just bill for the rest of it. But the console's turning on at least. So I need to get this port changed again because, like I said, like a fool, I've melted it. So my mics are dying as well, so I'm going to charge my mics for half an hour and then I'm going to get this port changed. Right, okay, let's get back to this then. So let's get this port changed again because, like a moron, I melted it. So I thought it was just the back plastic what was melted, but it's not. It's actually the inside of the port. So the charge cable, I've got one here that's not plugged in so as it doesn't do damage. But the charge cable itself won't actually plug in, look. So kind of screwed up there, but I'll get it changed again and hopefully this time I won't melt it. Alright, final task. I'm just going to give the inside of the port a bit of a clean. So a bit of IPA there. And then scrub the inside with a toothbrush. And this time I'm not going to screw anything down because I don't want to have to take it all back apart again just to be able to test the touchscreen. Okay, this is time for the moment of truth. Does it still have a blue screen of death? Or rather, has it redeveloped that blue screen of death? More to the point, is it going to charge? Let's find out. It's going to charge. We've got the charging icon there. So I'm going to need to leave this to charge with the battery that's in there, rather than keep on faffing around with external batteries and things like that. So I'll leave this to charge, I'll let it get some power, and I'll pick it up once the battery turns on the console. Right, how's this looking then? Yep, touchscreen don't work. Either that or the game card reader. Well, that sucks a little bit, doesn't it? Because now we're going to either change the game card reader or the touchscreen. Let's just try and figure out what it is. Okay, just grab a replacement game card reader. So this one does have liquid damage, so it could very well be that. Boot. It's the game card reader. Well, apparently the battery's on 16%, but that's a load of bull. Let's have a look at the game card reader, see what goes on with it. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is any sign of anything like damaged wires and things like that. Not seeing any. Yeah, not seeing any signs of damage on that at all. A little bit of something around the game card reader, but That's nothing to do with the touchscreen. Alright, well, let's give it a try once more just in case it wasn't plugged in correctly. Okay, that I felt clicking. 100% I felt that clicking then. Let's make sure the touchscreen itself is in. And let's turn it on. To make sure we charge it at the same time. It is fast charging, 0.9 amps. Yeah, that touch module is gone. Oh, that's a shame, because that's going to cost more. So, what do we do here? I mean, personally, I would say maybe either way, one of these things we're not going to be charging for. We're not going to be charging for either the charger port or we're not going to be charging for the touch module. Because otherwise we're not going to make any money on this at all. So, yeah, I mean, I've got to do a discount on this just to make it viable to repair and to actually keep it from being, you know, just another wasted piece of junk. But, you know, it seems to be working anyway with this touch module in it. It seems absolutely fine now. So, well, not with this module, with a different one. So I'll just confirm 100% that it's working with that touch module and do a couple more quick tests. So I've got to test the game as well and also test to make sure it docks. Yep, touch module working. Let's just test the Joy-Cons. That Joy-Con pairs. That one pairs. Make sure they work wirelessly. Yep. And yep, that one's working as well. Okay. Let's just test it on the dock really quickly. So I've got myself a little breakout cable which I can use to test the dock. So this breakout cable connects directly to my dock, and basically it's just a Thunderbolt extension cable. And it might help if I actually had power plugged into the dock, but never mind. Okay, so I've just plugged power into that, and for some reason my go away, get off, thank you. So yeah, my camera does that for some reason. Okay, so I'm going to grab the HDMI cable which goes to the TV, because I haven't got a capture card set up for anything at the minute. And yes, indeed, that does dock. So I'll show you this. As you'll see there, stick drift on my Joy-Con there. These have been used literally just for testing, and stick drift on them, typical. Yeah, so as you can see, this is all working, and yeah, this should be done. So happy days. So the switch breakout cable before I pop this away. As you can see, we've got the cable going from the dock, and then that goes down to here and plugs into the switch, and then that comes from there into my socket just here, my 20-volt socket. And that's how I power the switch. That's how I dock them. That's how it's done. So yeah, I mean, what can I say really? It's had a fair few parts. I've just got to put this back together and give it an extended test. But it seems to be working fine now. So obviously I'm probably going to lose a little bit of money on this, you know, a little bit of labour cost, but we have to make a decision. One of the decisions that we have to make sometimes is, do we just take a complete loss and end up not being able to charge a customer? See, the problem is, the way I work my business is I work on a no fix, no fee basis. And what that means is that if I don't fix the device, then I don't charge. And to me, a fix is not a fix unless it's completely fixed. So, yeah, I operate my business a little bit differently to some people. Some people think it's a foolish business model, but, you know, it keeps customers coming in. And they're happy to send the devices to me because they know that they're not going to get hit with any no-fix charges. So, basically, if I can't fix it, then I don't charge. So sometimes, as a business owner, as a technician, I have to make a decision. And one of them decisions that I have to make occasionally is, do I completely call it a no fix and not make any money at all for the time that I've invested in the repair? Or do I discount it a little bit and possibly, you know, give the customer a really, really good deal? Because let's face it, they're probably going to be getting the charger port replacement for free. They're not going to get the reflow for free, but they'll get the charger port replacement for free. I mean, it takes me a few minutes. It's not really a big deal. You know, when the customer's paying for a charge port replacement, they're not paying for how long it takes me. They're paying for the job. They're paying for the experience and the ability to replace it safely. It's not about how long it takes me. I can quite easily do a charger port start to finish. That includes disassembly, reassembly and test in about 20 minutes. And, you know, I can charge, you know, £60–70 for that. It's not about the time. It's not about the time, it's about the experience. But like I said, as a business owner, sometimes we have to make that decision. Do we take a complete loss, or do we lose just a little bit of money in labour and, you know, discount the repair for the customer, so as at least we've got a working device and we still make some money from it. So, you know, I mean, this is going to go back to the customer all fully working, and obviously, you know, I've got to charge quite a bit for this repair. I need to work it out. I mean, the game card readers alone cost, you know, £22, I think it is. So, you know, obviously parts are expensive for these. Game card reader especially, because it's not just a game card reader you're paying for the touch module as well. But that being said, this device is working and it's docking, it's charging, connecting Joy-Cons. I didn't actually check Wi-Fi. Let's just check that quickly. Let's just see if it picks up my internet. That's a lot of internet connections. Yep, there we go. So, connects to the coder there, or rather it picks up the coder there, so it's picking up my internet, so Wi-Fi is working. I've just got to put this back together, put the shield back on, put some new thermal paste on, put the heatsink back on, screw it back together, and it's done. So, that's going to be for this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Obviously, a fair few things wrong with this. The main thing, of course, being the blue screen of death. Couldn't verify that I mean, I could check the charger port, but I couldn't verify that the game card reader was working unless I plugged it into another device without fixing the blue screen of death first. So I narrowed that down to that top RAM IC, giving that a little reflow. Seems to be working absolutely perfectly. There's no crashing. You know, it's booting up absolutely fine. I will give it an extended test, so I'll leave it running in game for around about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, just to make sure that it doesn't crash. And then other than that, it's just send it back to the customer and move on to the next job. So, with that being said, if you do find these videos useful and you want to support me, then you can head over to Twitch and become a Twitch Prime subscriber. That helps me out a lot. It's free for you to do if you've got Amazon Prime, but it really does help out the channel. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the video description to Patreon. You can become a Patreon supporter, or you can become a channel member using the join button below the video. And channel members and Patreon supporters and Twitch members, as long as you're on my Discord, get early access to videos. If you want to organise your own repair, then you can do so by getting in touch using the website address in the video description, and I'll be happy to take on the repair for you. So you can either book the repair straight in, or you can get in touch using the contact page. You can phone me. There's a phone number on there. Please don't phone me for random questions and stuff about YouTube, because I'll probably just tell you to bugger off. It's a business line and it needs to be kept for business reasons. So yeah, you can get in touch and organise your repair that way. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell notifications, and that way you don't miss any future videos. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to read and reply to them. But that's going to be for this video. I'm super happy to get this working. Happy that we've saved another one from the scrap pile. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye for now.